So I have a couple of slides to share today, and then I'm going to jump into the instance. So just feel free to ask questions. I'll try to keep an eye on chat. And I got a poll out there, and I see we've got a lot of people that are new to ServiceNow, or to HR service delivery, not necessarily ServiceNow. So hopefully this is some new information for you. Just to give you a brief overview, I spent 5 years as a customer before moving into the partner space, and I've worked at 4 different partners, so a lot of people I might recognize here. And then I've been at ServiceNow for 39 days, so I made the jump over to the mothership and became, earlier this year, I did become a certified master architect. So lots of changes for me this year, and I'm happy to be here and happy to be part of this thing that Jace put together for us all. Just to kind of get started, I'm going to go over some common configurations I do with every HRSD implementation. I've been working with ServiceNow 16 years. HRSD has been my focus about the last 5. These are things that I wish I would have known during my first implementations. So hopefully you guys will get some good information out of this. And then HR services and the supporting tables that I use often with those. But just to kind of level set the tables, ServiceNow installs a lot of tables with HR applications. There's HR Core, which installs all of the ones that are circled here in green, right? These come with the HR Core application, HR employee, or when you install employee relations, you get the employee relations tables, and then lifecycle events. Now, just licensing is different. Every release, something changes. So just always check with your account rep before you install something to make sure you're entitled for it. But for most people, professional licensing would include all of the HR Core tables plus employee relations, and then you need HR Enterprise licensing for the lifecycle event cases. But my focus today is mostly on HR Core and case and knowledge management and what we do for that base implementation for customers. All right. The other thing to think about is, while ServiceNow installs a lot of services with some of the HR Core applications, those are in the dark blue. Those come with about 43 different services out of the box. The ones in the light blue don't have any services pre-configured, and these are COE tables that ServiceNow might not have fully developed out. So there's a couple of things that we have to do if we're going to use those tables. The first is modifying the form views. It doesn't have some of the basic fields that you think would be on every form view, including the work notes and additional comments, the fulfillment instructions and checklists that come with them, as well as configuring the fields that come with those. If you forget to put these fields on the form when you're using those new COE tables, you will get this error message letting you know to do that. So just kind of a reminder to get those fields on the form when you're building out those new COE tables. And this is for any custom table, COE table that you might want to build as well. And then the other thing that's not pre-configured with those new COE tables are the email notifications and the inbound actions, right? So each of ServiceNow has outbound email notifications for every COE table pre-configured for the ones that have services. So you see on the left side of my screen, those notifications they have there. These are all record driven as well. So keep in mind, you might want to look at these and convert them to be event-based so you can manage one set of notifications off the core case table instead of having to manage them for each individual COE table. Just depends on how unique those notifications need to be. If you are going to manage them at the table level, then you would need to add them for the new COEs as well. You also need to add inbound email actions. Because the script in there actually calls to get the current table name, you have to create new inbound actions for those new COEs as well. So you're going to have a little bit extra configuration for those COEs that don't come with services pre-configured. Yep. And then just think. Okay. So those are the things around the tables and the form layouts that you need to take into account. But when you are building new services, I recommend always using the Manage HR Catalog module. And I'm going to jump into my instance in just a second after this slide, because that HR catalog module puts together the record producer, the template, and the HR service record. It builds the shell of them, so you don't have to remember to do all three of those manually. The one thing to note is that first one on the new COE, it won't actually show up, right? The new COEs like HR benefits case doesn't show up until you create one service for it. So after you create that initial service for any of those new COEs, you would then be able to see it in the new record or in the manage HR catalog module, which I'll jump to in just a second. And then the last slide I have, this was something that I found maybe, I don't know, after my third or fourth project. ServiceNow has a lot of script includes with a lot of functionality built into it for HR that you just have to go looking for. So just remember, go look for it before you build something custom. But often I'd have scripts or two record producers that really needed to create the same service on the back end. And ServiceNow gives you a way to do that. When you use that manage HR catalog item, it will create the script include or the record producer with this script include call in the script function of that RP. If you need it to call if you need a record producer that's not tied to the service, you can use this new create case from producer by service function, and then just paste in the service ID in the middle here. And that allows you to have two different record producers creating the same service on the back end. I often see that if the record producer, the intake forms need to be wildly different, but the service is really the same, right? If they need to hide and show a lot of fields or ask for different information, it's just, managing those UI policies on the record producer might be difficult and just cumbersome in nature. So I've seen this when we want one service on the back end, but different intake forms on the front end. And then let me jump into the instance and I will show you some of this stuff. All right. So first, the Manage HR Service Catalog. This is where I said to go to create your new service, because when you do that, it generates that record producer template and service record all as one one step instead of multiple. And then, so if you look here, this is the record producer that got generated. But when I go to the HR service, and that's the one I was missing, not having set up. So it creates the service record, it created the template, and it created the record producer for me. I did this all before the session today. But that way I have all of these shell records set up, ready for me to start developing the record producer, the intake forms that I need. And there's other things that you can do on this service record that if I have time, I'll go into, but I might not. I might run out of time today. So we have the different fields, and then just going back to the record producer. So this is where I really wanted to spend kind of a bulk of my time today, was on the record producer itself and some supporting tables to get that intake from your customers or from the employees. So the first thing I want to talk about is the variable names. We all know how to map a variable to a field, right? If you have a field on the form, so I have a field called primary topic that's hidden, or that's on the case table that I map to this field to. But what you might not know about HRSD is ServiceNow tries to be helpful. If you have a field on the HR profile and you have the variable of the same name, it's going to try to map that field to the HR profile of that person. So let me show you how this works. Let's see if I can bring up my employee center. And the really easy way to identify that this happened is based on the description, because with that script in the record producer, it puts all of the question and answer combinations into the description of the into the description of the case record. So when you bring up the case record, you'll see the questions and answers from the variables. But you can see I have one date of birth field that has a unique variable name. If I go back to my record producer, so unique variable name V, date of birth, and this one down here, it matches this name. Even though it doesn't map to a field, it maps to this value is actually a field on the HR profile record. So when I submit this, you can see the unique variable name has just that, whereas the one that matches a field on the HR profile tells me the original value on the HR profile for this person. Their birth date was 11/26 of 2013. So it's gone and updated the HR profile, or letting me know that this needs to be updated on the HR profile. So if you're ever collecting information that really doesn't need to map to the HR profile and it's not mapping to any field on the case table, you need to make sure that you're using a unique variable name. Otherwise, this is going to be confusing to your agents because they're like, what original value? Where did this come from? This is the first time we're seeing this case. So just keep that in mind. And then there's also some sync properties between HR profile and sysuser that might trigger some updates with this. So you just be careful with your variable names, I guess is the point here. And then you also have one of the other things that I do a lot with implementations is manage the supporting tables for the questions, right? So we often have with HR changing requirements of drop-down lists. I have, a list of benefit providers or a list of, specific options within talent management that I need to be able to easily edit and change. Now, ServiceNow provides a list of existing tables where you can add lists, values like benefit types and benefit plans and things like that. There's a single table for every different type of data. But a lot of times with implementations, you don't want to create a bunch of new tables. Customers most often are limited to 15 custom tables with their HR purchase. So you're not wanting to use up all those tables just as lookup lists, but you don't want to use a choice list because ServiceNow, because of the way you manage choice lists, right? The best practice is you manage it, update a choice list in dev, you move it to test and then prod. And HR doesn't want to wait for a release cycle to add a new benefit plan or a new flexible work option to their lists. So out of the box, there is a table called generic lookup. It comes when you install the HR core table, and it comes with just like the basic fields, created, updated, sysid, etc. I modify this to be used as a reference table for my variables and fields. Now, it does require a security change on the dictionary table, because I have a reference field to dictionary entry. And that just depends on who you're letting modify this table. If you're just doing system admins, you don't need that. But often I allow HR admins to modify this generic lookup table. So I do need to make a change to the sys dictionary table so that HR admins can read values from the dictionary. But the purpose of this is to make variables and fields on the form so that they have lookups and people don't have to go through the whole choice list process of adding values. And I often add two different types. So sometimes there's fields that are going to be on the back end that I need reference fields, to be able to look up, and sometimes it's variables. And it just depends on what the need for the customer is. I always make a decision. Does this variable need its own field? The answer is it depends, as every consultant knows. That's really because I kind of ask questions, do you need this for reporting or auditing or tracking, or does the data need to be secured in a certain way? If not, it might not need to be its own field because they're going to see the agents will see the questions and answers in the description of that case record. So not everything needs to be its own field. Keep that in mind because customers are also limited to the number of custom fields they get. So you really need to be careful on if it needs to be its own field and which table it needs to be on. Does it need to be on the top level HR case table, or does it need to be on just the COE specific table like payroll or benefits? All right, so what I do here with the generic lookup table is I add fields, the lookup type. Am I looking it up? Is this a field or is this a variable that I'm going to use this? What service it's tied to, and then the field, the next field changes between field or variable based on what I select in the lookup type. And so if I choose field, then this maps to the dictionary table, and it's limited to specific field types, right? So only those on the HR case tables, as well as, if it's a reference or a glide list field. I'm not trying to show every dictionary field to the HR admins because we don't want to confuse them. We want to keep it simple to from a maintenance perspective. The value, obviously, that is my display field for this table. It's what they want to show in the reference field. And then the order is important. If they don't want it to show alphabetically, they want, different orders. You just build that into your reference field, your sort order. And then the last field I add here is around who it's available for. Sometimes if I have a field, I want a bunch of values to be visible to the employees while they're filling out the form, but there's a couple of hidden values that only the agents can see on the back end. So I set that up here so that I can limit who the availability is for. I haven't had too many customers have something that needed more complexity about the availability of the values to move into user criteria or HR criteria. Just kept it really simple here. And that is what I do with this. If I go into my reference variables on my general benefits inquiry form, you can see I have the lookup to the generic lookup table, and I build out just a simple reference qualifier. It's active, what the service is, what the field is, and who it's available for, so that when I fill that out on the form itself, let's see, I'm going to go back a screen. Sorry for all the jumping around. So I have these particular values, medical and spending accounts, but if I look at the, there we go. I have values. I have a hidden value that's not visible on the record producer. When I go to the agent view, it will be visible on the agent workspace. And so this one's reference, it's looking to that specific field, but I also have another field on there a variable that's asking about the specific account type. And this is a reference, but it's not mapped to any field. So I kind of, make sure I'm the same thing, limiting the values that are showing up here and what variable I'm selecting. So, as I said, not everything needs to map to a field. So sometimes we do need that variable option on the generic lookup table. And then you can use this, like I've used this table for all kinds of lookups. ServiceNow, like I said, has pre-built tables for a bunch of other types of lookups, even more that don't show up here in this managed list. There's hidden ones like for leave benefits, time off types, all kinds of things. So always look what you're in ServiceNow to see what's been installed as part of the plugin. Because I think last I checked, I think there were like 185 tables installed when you install the HR Core table, HR Core plugin. And not all of them obviously are meant to be, reused in different ways. But this one, the generic lookup table is one of my favorite things to use just to make maintenance and life a little easier for HR admins. Okay, gonna look and see if there's questions. All right, so I see a couple things in Q&A, so I'm going to take a stab at those. What's the recommended place to place universal requests in the HR COE? So I haven't had a lot of customers that are using universal requests, but universal requests are a connection, right? You start with a universal request and then you can create a case from it. It's not a COE specifically. It's going to connect to a COE. Recommended training and courses if we plan to purchase HRSD in the future. So there is a short one. There's an hour and a half in Now Learning called Introduction to HRSD that goes over some of these concepts. I think it's a free on-demand course. I can probably share those links out afterwards. I've got a OneNote with a ton of courses that I can share out about HRSD. That one's a short one, and I don't even. It might have a lab. I'm not 100% on that. But then there's HR Fundamentals and HR Implementer that you would take after those two, or after that intro one. But I would start with the intro one. It just gives you a high overview of the concepts and different things before you dive into the full on-demand courses, which are, about a lot longer, or the 3-day course if you go through a training session. Is it truly a bad practice to use existing ITSM tables for HR-related requests? From a security perspective, absolutely. You don't have a lot of control over what people are going to input into those questions. So they might put PII information in there, and even if you build the security around them, your system admins are still going to have access to that. With security, with HRSD, you can prevent system admins from even seeing that data. You can do it if you build robust security around it, but think about the effort and time you need to take to maintain and upgrade it and ensure that it remains secure data. I've had this asked multiple times, and I would not put HR information in ITSM tables. You just don't know what your employees are going to put in those questions. Any other questions or follow-ups to what I've said? We've got 2 minutes. Oh, the good point, David. HR, if ServiceNow sees that you are using something for that they have a product for, they may come back and ask you to true up and purchase the licensing, and then you need to take the action to move the custom ITSM into HRSD. So now you're rebuilding it again, which I have had to do for a customer. I've had customers build custom ITSM solutions to support HR, and we've had to take the time and energy to eventually move those into HRSD. Great questions. I apologize for the audio snafu at the beginning. Like I said, I tested multiple times, but so I will share out the links to the training. I'll get those over to the Jace and the organizers, and they can share them out with the group. Thanks, everyone.